Hey everybody, this is Death by D4 and come on, we all know why you're here. Tieflings, probably one of the coolest races in all of 5th edition, hellishly hot to say the least. But you know what? What if Tieflings were better? Now I know that's a pretty big ask to come out of nowhere, especially from me, but it's a question I want to ask anyway. Because if we look over at the stat block of what you actually get for playing as a Tiefling, I think you might be a little surprised about some stuff. Boom, there it is. Now, certain modern design conventions aside, you don't really actually get all that much for playing a literal half-demon, basically. You get dark vision, that makes sense. Almost every race gets dark vision. You get Hell's Resistance, that's just fire resistance. It's nice, it makes a lot of sense, but that's all you're getting from that. And Infernal Legacy, which is just a cantrip and a couple of spells in like weird scaling order. And that's it, that's literally all you get for playing probably one of the most popular races I've ever heard of. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this isn't garbage, but if you compare it to some of the blowups that happened out of the Multiverse of Monsters book, and seeing that Tieflings didn't get an update out of that book, this is starting to look a little bland, isn't it? So that's exactly what we're gonna do today. We're gonna take this and we're just gonna make it better. So first things first, let's take all the core bits of this and modernize it. Bam, there you go. Now already Tieflings are looking a little bit better with that floating ability score increase, and just because of the simple fact that it makes total lore sense and the fact that it'd be adorable as heck, I've gone and put a size modifier so that way you can play as a small tiefling if you really want to. Yay. Oh, and of course I've modernized the language selection because even though we all know you're going to take Infernal anyway, it's nice to at least have the choice in case you really don't want to. Now, although we're going to carry over all the other unique features of this race over as well, it pays to actually go and look at a few other races that are probably somewhat similar to the tiefling just so that we have something to gauge ourselves against. Now, what races are actually similar to tieflings, especially because there's not really that many demonic races in D&D? Well, I think there's a few that are worth looking at. The Fire Genasi, only because of the fact that it's probably one of the only other races we have that has an innate affiliation with fire. The Satyr, and I mean, I'm taking a bit of a stretch with this one, but come on. The Satyr is like biologically really similar to the Tiefling. They both sometimes have hooves, have horns, and are magical creatures. And lastly, the Yuan-Ti. Might be a bit of a stretch with this one, but hey, this one gets innate spellcasting, a damage resistance, and dark vision. So although the intricacies of it are different, it's already very similar to what a Tiefling wants to be. Now looking back over here at the Fire Genasi, the main takeaway I'm getting out of this is how it does its spellcasting. Tieflings get Thaumaturgy, that's a completely reasonable cantrip for them to get. And then at 3rd level, they get a 2nd level casting of Hellish Rebuke. I mean, yes, that makes total sense as well, but it's a bit strange with it actually being 2nd level. Yes, I understand that plays somewhat more into the balancing when the subraces are considered, but I think for just this look at, we're gonna just ignore all the subraces. After all, I'd be surprised if WotC ever even brought those back, honestly, if they ever update Tiefling. And then lastly, at 5th level, you get yourself a casting of Darkness, which again, is very appropriate for the Tiefling. But looking back over at the Genasi, we can see that it gets a cantrip, and then it gets a 1st level spell that's a normal 1st level spell casting at 3rd level, and then it gets a 2nd level spell at 5th level. All of these spells can be cast once for free, and you get to cast them with your spell slots. And then most importantly, you get to pick the actual ability score that you get to use when casting the spell. So even though it's going to nerf our spell casting a tiny bit, I think we could just take this and just paste it over onto the Tiefling. Boom, and there you go. Alrighty, that's looking pretty modernized already, and I'm already pretty happy with keeping Infernal Legacy to begin with. After all, if you want to be able to try and make the subclasses work with this, then it at least would still be somewhat possible. That and the race is very magically affiliated, and I don't really want to take that away from it. Especially because Thaumaturgy is just a great flavor cantrip for this race to get in general. Now that said, am I afraid about giving more power to the Tiefling? No, absolutely not. Thaumaturgy has absolutely no practical uses whatsoever. It has little to no utility and cannot be used to damage anybody. Hellish Rebuke could be used to damage people, but we've already knocked it down a spell level. And Darkness is great utility, but again, doesn't actually cause damage. So ultimately, whatever we add from this point forth should be able to make the race a bit stronger. Looking over at the Satyr, the first thing that steps out to me is the fact that they are Fays, which means they are not the typical humanoids of other races. And looking over the Tiefling, I bet you know where my brain is going. Yeah, this is a great thing to ask ourselves. Why are Tieflings not just fiends? I mean, think about it. I've actually done the calculations about this. Being a fiend is not that much disadvantageous than being a Fae. Heck, it's probably more advantageous than being a construct, and WotC's certainly trying to make that work right now. So as far as I'm concerned, even though it could probably fly in the face of some crazy lore that exists out there somewhere that I'm not aware about, I genuinely think that what we should do is just make the Tiefling a bona fide fiend. Boom, and there you go. I mean, doesn't that already kind of feel really cool? You're no longer just playing as some stand-up wannabe fiend. You're actually fully and legitimately a fiend now. I don't think it's that much of a power increase, but I think in terms of just flavor and fun, I think this is exactly where we need to go with it. Next up, there's the Ram feature on the Satyr, which sure, Satyrs and Tieflings both have horns, but let's face it, Tieflings don't really mimic goats quite as closely as satyrs do. At the very least, you could definitely make an argument for including ram or something similar to that on the Tiefling. But I think for our interests, we're probably going to lean more into the magical, fiendish natures of the race, just to make sure that it stands out the way that it's supposed to. And speaking of standout features, we've also got magic resistance. Oh boy. Now I know what you're all thinking. Don't you dare do it. Or maybe you're just big fans of Tieflings and you realize, yes, please do it, put it on it. But here's the thing. There are about 116 fiends that have been added as monsters to the 5th edition manuals, and of those fiends, 76 of them have magic resistance. Yes, that's 65% of fiends that have this feature. Now I know what you're thinking, maybe it just only belongs on some really high level fiends. But no, it really doesn't. In fact, not only does the fiendish spirit that you could summon from the Tasha spells have it, even the imp has it, alongside Devil's Sight, which is a pretty noteworthy feature. I think we're gonna come back to that in a second. Considering its prevalence to fiends as a whole and the fact that we've now actually made the Tiefling into a proper fiend, I think we genuinely at least have to try and get it to fit in there, whatever it takes. Oh god, what am I doing? This is already starting to look really scary compared to the normal Tiefling. And all we've really done is just add magic resistance and change its creature type. But admittedly, this is already feeling so much better. However, we really haven't added any standout, unique feature to this race yet that really deserves to complement its fiend typing. That is until... Yeah, remember I said Devil's Sight was a thing? Yeah, well, a lot of fiends, especially devils, actually have this feature. Though it doesn't work quite the same as the Warlock's Devil's Sightification. The Warlock's Devil's Sightification is a genuinely very powerful feature. It gives you 120 feet of completely seeing through all darkness and dim light and magical darkness. It's like everything around you is complete broad daylight. Now, Devil's Sight on normal fiends, on the other hand, it just makes magical darkness into normal darkness, and then it stacks on top of their normal dark vision. That is a much weaker way to actually implement something like Devil's Sight, and if we're leaning really heavily into making Tieflings into bona fide fiends, I think that's a really good feature to try and include to make them super unique compared to other races out there. So what we can do then is we can take the normal 60 feet of dark vision that a Tiefling normally has, and we can just stack Devil's Sight on top of it. Now that is looking really fun right now. I mean, seriously, not only is that a really unique feature for a race to actually get, that it just opens up so many avenues of play, but the innate casting of the Infernal Legacy also plays into this. For cripe's sake, you're getting a free casting of Darkness. You are going to be able to use Devil's Sight no matter what, even if you're not playing as a spellcaster. This alone has just genuine synergy. This makes me giddy. It makes me feel like this is actually working. But hey, let's not get ourselves too carried away. There is one thing we are forgetting about. So let's just take a quick look at the Yuan-Ti. You know, infamously one of the most powerful races in all of D&D that actually had to be nerfed back a bit in 5th edition just because it was a little too ridiculous. Already we're seeing that this race has Dark Vision. We have a slightly better version of Dark Vision. This one has magic resistance. Again, same thing what we're getting. And then it has a advantage on saving throws against being poisoned and resistance to poison damage. Now for Tieflings, we should be looking at fire damage, especially because that's the way it has been set up before and it should be carried over. But you know what? Fiends have a lot of poison resistances too. And considering that this race gets an advantage on a condition and a resistance, we could just put 2 resistances on the Tiefling. However, we probably shouldn't do that because not only is that a little too crazy, it actually flies in the face with this particular Tiefling feat right here. Yeah, I genuinely keep forgetting that these Tiefling feats actually exist. There's 2 of them. But this one in particular not only gives you resistance to cold and poison, increases your constitution, and then gives you advantage on poison saving throws. So although this makes perfect sense, we probably shouldn't add that in because otherwise it's just going to fly in the face of this feat and make it completely useless. And then lastly, looking back over at the Yuan-Ti, we can see that spellcasting is about as weird as the base Tiefling. However, there is kind of a reason for that. The casting of Animal Friendship that it gets is actually an unlimited amount, but it could only target snakes. Considering the incredible uniqueness of that to the Yuan-Ti, there's absolutely no reason we should reference something like that for the Tiefling. Plus, let's not forget that we've already borrowed the spellcasting feature from the Genasi, so I mean, it's kind of already working as it is already. I mean, geez, did you guys actually compare the Tiefling and the new Genasi to each other? They're so almost identically the same, the only difference is the spells that you get, so this is part of the reason why I think it's really important that Tieflings get some significant changes. And there it is! Now honestly, is this a bit of a glow up compared to the base Tiefling as it normally is? In all honesty, yeah, like obviously, seriously. But you know what? And I'm not even saying this just because I am partial to Tieflings. This is a really, really good change for them. Honestly, I'm like kind of shocked that we haven't received something like this for them already, if only because of the fact that trying to get something like this to work for them does conflict a lot with all of the sub-races that have been released already. I mean, to be fair, most of the sub-races just swap out the spells that you learn for other spells. And considering the fact we downcast Hellish Rebuke to first level, that's gonna screw with a little bit of that in the future. And not to mention that the entire Infernal Legacy feature can be completely removed for just wings and flying on the Feral Tiefling. Honestly, having a flying race that also has Devil Sight and magic resistance would be kind of nutty. So although I think it's probably best that we don't acknowledge that for right now, I think for while we're talking about the base Tiefling as a whole, this is just insanely cool. I don't know, maybe that's just me. You know what, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. If you ever play one of my D&D games, I will absolutely let you play as this Tiefling. Not only do I think you would have a really fun time doing it, I think I enjoyed running the game for you as well. Of course, just sound off in the comments down below. A big Tiefling fan, you like all the changes I've done here? Or are you just a really hardcore balance enthusiast and you think that I've gone way too far with this? I don't know, this is a bit of homebrew nonsense for me, but I really felt inspired to try and do this. Especially because I am genuinely a big fan of this race and I want to see it get some more love. So yeah, that's What If Tieflings Were Better? You're welcome.